What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button, and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get to it.
Strange as it may seem, the Nissan 350Z cannot be called a commercially successful car. The coupe debuted in 2002, and the key market for it was North American, but sales were high only for the first couple of years, and then systematically declined. And they decreased significantly. If in the first years more than 30,000 cars were sold, then further this figure quickly fell to 20 to 25, and restyling in 2007 did not affect the situation. In 2009, sales completely stopped, and the coupe gave way to the successor, 370Z. In Europe, the car was niche at all. Only 5,000 to 7,000 copies were sold there in the best years. The model was even presented in Russia at a price of less than 2 million rubles. However, this amount seems low now, but then it was very decent money, so the sales were meager. Thus, 350Z can actually be considered as another proof that the interest of the audience is not always transformed into successful sales. And after all, the coupe was originally designed with a very careful approach to details. It received the Nissan FM platform from other rear-wheel drive cars of Nissan and Infiniti, for example the Infiniti G, and it's also the basis, incidentally, for the Infiniti FX crossovers. Infiniti FX. The car had a very good rigidity of the body, behind the rear seats. There is a powerful cross-brace amplifier, and high engine power in the older versions was complemented by good Brembo brakes. Only such cars were sold in European markets. Let's have a look at what is left of them after 13 to 20 years. If we talk about the body condition, it is almost guaranteed to be atypical for such an old car. The reasons are clear. Like other exclusives like the Honda S2000, Nissan 350Z is not a car, but first of all a hobby or a favorite toy, so money for them is usually not spared. That's why some cars are meticulously maintained in factory condition, and some are repainted in a new color faster than they start to rust. The most unfortunate variant is wrapping with a film. It often hides destructive processes that show themselves only as bubbles on the outside, under which they may actually be loose or even through corrosion. In general, there are plenty of problem points. The most standard and popular are the arches and sills, where paint damage is followed by rust. The surface around the beautiful aluminum door handles is also at risk. When bubbles appear from under the handle, there may already be loose corrosion. Of course, maximum attention should be paid to what is hidden from view: arch cavities, underbody, and other hard-to-reach places. They do not affect the beauty, they do not need to be painted, and therefore they sometimes forget to wash and anti-corrosion, which is unacceptable for a car at such an age. There are also some specialty features. For example, on the front pillars and further, along the roof above the doors, there are plastic covers. Firstly, there will be corrosion under them, and secondly, it is better to take care of the covers, because they are more expensive than it may seem. Generally speaking of body parts, almost everything here costs a lot more than it may seem. At first glance, such a popular car along with a lot of tuning should have received a lot of options of non-original body parts, but we remember about sales, right? So we should not be surprised that almost all bodywork can be bought only original. And the prices are corresponding. Offers from different sellers can differ many times depending on the supplier and delivery time. For example, the hood costs from 60 to 70,000 more. The price tags of many sellers are well over 100,000. Moreover, both restyled and pre-restyled hood is equally expensive. In fact, it was the only change in appearance during the restyling of 2007. A front fender costs anywhere from 15 to 20k to 50 to 60k. A front bumper from 20 to 25k and up. The rear bumper is difficult to find at all. Offers for sale are piecemeal, and the price is the same 20 to 30,000. Even the windshield, not unified with other models, also has no assortment of analogs, except for the original from 30 to 40,000. There is only a piece analog from XYG for 12 to 15. The rear part will not please either. The price tag of the trunk lid is 6 figures, and the glass for it also costs 30 to 40,000. Although there is also an analog from XYG for 10 to 12,000. Xenon headlamp costs 50 to 70,000 more depending on execution and year of release. Beautiful taillights will require 20 to 25,000 for each, although there are variants of tuning lights for 4 to 6,000 per piece. Actually, The FN platform on which the 350Z was built didn't mean that the suspension design was simply borrowed from conventional sedans. Suspensions here are their own. In fact, they are double wishbones all around, but there are actually 2 lower arms in front, and 3 at all in the rear, 2 links and a lever on which the spring rests. On the move, it provides interesting controllability, and in maintenance and repair promises decent costs in case of responsible complex approach. Fortunately, here there are not the same difficulties as with body parts. Almost all elements can be bought non-original if necessary. But to look at the price of the cheapest spare parts when repairing 350Z is a mauvais. You should not save money here. Moreover, if not to go deep into tuning, there is nothing shocking here. The front upper arm costs $9,000 for the original and $5,000 to $7,000 for the analog. Repair ball bearing, from $1,500 to $3,000. Lower arms of the front suspension are also not cheap, $8,000 for the front and $15,000 to $20,000 for the rear, but analogs are available for $4,000 to $8,000. The lower ball bearing of the steering knuckle is also available in a non-original version for 1,000 to 2,000 rubles. Needless to say, for almost all silent blocks and bushings there is an assortment of non-original, so if you want, you can repress anything. The only question is the stability of characteristics and resource after repair. Stabilizer struts cost the usual money, 2,000 for the original and from 400 rubles for analogs. With shock absorbers is a little more difficult. In addition to the original for 20,000 actually there is only a detail from KYB for 6, and of good alternatives, only a sporty set Bilstein B6, where the front shock absorbers cost 18 to 20,000, and rear for 13 to 14. The front hub assembly will cost 7,000 for firm, and from 3 for non-original, and the rear hub bearing can be bought separately. From 2,000 at the price of the original in 4 to 5. The rear suspension also gives a choice between replacing silent blocks and buying levers, and the prices are about the same. Lower rods cost 3,000 for the original and 1,000 to 2,000 for the analog, but the upper lever will cost 10,000 to 12,000, and there are actually no replacements for it. Of course, when buying a used Nissan 350Z, the chance to come across a car with a killed suspension is unlikely, but attempts to bring it to a near-factory condition after tuners of different skillfulness degree can cost a lot of money. As we remember, the brakes on most cars are just fine. In the US, the base versions had the usual mechanisms with a floating bracket, but in Europe, the standard were optional for the U.S. Brembo monoblocks around the circle, 4-piston in front and 2-piston in the rear. Brake discs are also quite decent in size, 324mm in front and 322mm in the rear. Of course, all this will require money in a comprehensive reassembly, and in the basic maintenance will not be very budgetary. As it was already mentioned above, you should not save money here, and even more so on brakes, so you should not fall for the cost of the cheapest brake discs in 3,000 to 4,000. The decent ones will cost 7,000 to 10,000 per unit in a circle, and the tuning ones with grooves and perforation will easily reach 20 and more. The original ones, by the way, cost 15 per piece in front and 25 to 40 behind, but you can ignore it, as well as a set of pads, which can be found on sale for 40,000. However, a decent set of non-original pads will still cost 3,000 to 6,000, though prices start from 1,000 rubles. The steering here is with the usual power steering, but it is also its own, so in the absence of congenital problems, it should not be forgiven for malfunctions. After all, for example, a new pump of hydraulic power steering will cost 50,000 and has no analogs. The rack is also not so easy to buy. The original is rare and is offered under the order at a 6-figure price, and there are no restored assembled ones. In any case, it will be necessary to deal with reassembly. So, it is worth to pay attention to absence of leaks, backlashes and knocks of the rack, and also noises of the pump. Any defect can be a reason for a decent bargaining. In the USA, the coupe was expectedly offered not only with a manual, but also with an automatic. Thus, 2-pedal cars are popular in our country, so if you consider 350Z not as a car for really interesting and active driving, but rather as an image car, automatic transmission can be a logical choice. Especially that 5-speed automatic RE5 R05A, familiar to us on the Infiniti G, Nissan Navara Patrol as well as Korean models, such as Hyundai Genesis or Kia Mojave, it can be considered a successful and reliable gearbox, subject to oil change once in 40 to 50,000 kilometers, as well as installation of a larger cooling radiator for active driving. This automatic transmission can pass more than 300,000 kilometers, Even the torque converter locking pads are quite survivable. However, jerks and jolts at shifts are definitely a bad sign. Problems can be with hydroblock, and with solenoids, and with electrics. And all this usually hints at a quick reassembly. An alternative to the automatic is a 6-speed manual FS6R31A gearbox, which is very well tolerant of engine power and active driving. The only thing that will require attention is the flywheel and clutch. The flywheel here is 2-mass, and its life depends on the style of operation. But the price on the general background is not prohibitive. The original, of course, has a 6-figure price tag, but the node from Luke can be bought for $30,000 to $35,000. It is much worse that the clutch costs approximately the same money. The original set will cost $30,000 to $35,000, non-original like. A basket from XD does not allow to save much, and the clutch set from Luke will cost even more expensive than the original. At the same time, the clutch is not too fond of drifting. Together with 2-mass flywheel, it creates the effect of slippage, so that attempts to drive regularly sideways can finish the clutch and flywheel before the end. When buying, it is necessary to assess their condition, and also to check the viscous self-lock. On European cars it was a standard option, but on basic American cars it was absent. There was no choice of engine for 350Z buyers, but it cannot be called a problem. Under the hood there were excellent 3.5-litre V6. Before the restyling it was VQ35DE with 287 horsepower, and after the restyling it was replaced by VQ35HR, which increased its output to 310 horsepower. These are very successful and strong motors with chain timing with a resource of 200,000 kilometers and conventional distributed injection. Potential resource of the piston could spoil the catalytic converter, but now it is hardly possible to find a car where it is not removed. Otherwise, with a good and clean cooling system and good oil, the motor can pass more than 300,000 kilometers. But taking into account the age and style of operation of these machines, it is worth understanding that there is nothing eternal. In the world, often there will be a contract unit under the hood. If we take into account all the difficulties with body repair, the price of complex repair of suspension and brakes, clutch maintenance, as well as fuel consumption and transportation tax of more than $40,000, then it turns out that even today a not old Nissan 350Z is a car for a responsible and wealthy enthusiast. Of course, the market is full of tempting offers, right-hand drive cars, copies with Abkhazian, Armenian, and any other numbers, as well as variants on transits and simply without customs clearance. For example, more than half of 19 cars on Avito at the time of writing this material were such. However, there are also decent samples. Taking into account really good potential of the chassis and wide possibilities of the car, the best choice will be a well-groomed coupon mechanics, about like this if Auto Techer confirms the absence of serious accidents in the past, and the inspection proves the technical condition, then it will remain only to not skimp on maintenance. And considering that more of these cars do not become, 350Z can be considered not only an interesting car that can give a lot of emotions and experience on the track, but also a good investment. In conclusion, the Nissan 350Z presents a compelling mix of power, performance, and prestige, but with a price tag of $1.5 million, it's essential to weigh the pros and cons carefully. While its exhilarating driving experience and iconic design may appeal to enthusiasts, potential buyers should consider factors such as maintenance costs, insurance, and long-term value. Ultimately, whether this car is worth the investment depends on your personal priorities and passion for driving. Make sure to do your research and assess if the thrill of owning a Nissan 350Z aligns with your budget and lifestyle. Thank you for watching, and we hope this video has helped you in your decision-making process.